All right, today we are diving headfirst into what might just be the deepest mystery in all of science. We're talking about consciousness. We're going to unpack why it's such a mind-bending puzzle, and then we'll look at a pretty radical new idea that could, for the first time ever, give us a way to actually test for it.
So, it all starts with a question that sounds super simple, almost like a kid would ask it, but it absolutely stumps the smartest people on the planet. When you look at, say, a red apple, your brain is processing wavelengths of light, right? But you don't just process the data. You have an experience. You see the color red. So where does that private internal feeling of redness actually come from? That little question? Well, that's the key to this whole mystery. Now, before we even dream of a solution, we have to really get our heads around the massive scale of the problem itself. This isn't just some tricky question for neuroscience. It's a fundamental gap in how we see reality. And yeah, it's got a name: the hard problem. The philosopher, David Chalmers, kind of split this whole thing into two buckets. On one side, you have what he called the easy problems. Now, don't get me wrong, they're not actually easy at all. They're incredibly complex questions about how the brain crunches information and controls what we do. But, and this is key, we can imagine solving them by just mapping out all the brain's wiring. But the hard problem, that's a whole different beast. It's not about what the brain does, it's about why it feels like something to be a brain. Why doesn't all this complicated stuff just happen in the dark, without any subjective experience at all?
For decades, neuroscientists have been hunting for the so-called neural correlates of consciousness, and they've gotten really, really good at it. They can map exactly which parts of your brain light up when you feel happy, or see a familiar face. But it's like having this perfect treasure map with a giant X on it, and when you finally dig, all you find is another map. See, finding a correlation, seeing a brain region light up, isn't the same thing as finding the experience. We can see the brain doing the work, but we still can't, for the life of us, explain how that physical work creates the actual feeling.
Okay, so to make this feel a little less abstract, let's just focus on what we're actually talking about when we say experience. It's the very fabric of our lives, so constant and so close that we barely even notice it's there. It's that feeling inside. Just think about this for a second. I don't mean the chemical reactions or the signals shooting up to your brain. I mean the actual, subjective, rich, velvety sensation of tasting chocolate. It's a quality, a feeling that exists only inside your mind. Or how about this one? We can describe the nerve signals, right? The inflammation, the brain's alarm bells going off. But none of that technical talk is the same as the raw, undeniable, and frankly awful feeling of the pain itself. That feeling is something else entirely. It's separate from the physical process.
And here we are, back at red. There is just no way to describe the quality of redness to someone who's never seen color. You can talk about the physics of light all day long, but you can't actually transmit the inner feeling. It is a purely internal, subjective quality, and that is the absolute core of this mystery.
So these private internal feelings, they actually have a name. It's qualia. That's the fancy philosophical term for the taste of chocolate, the sting of pain, and the experience of red. Qualia is the what it's likeness of life. So the hard problem? It's really the problem of qualia. Why on earth does a physical brain produce any of this stuff at all?
Okay, if that all still seems a bit out there, don't worry. Philosophers came up with some really powerful thought experiments to make this problem totally impossible to ignore. And this is where things start to get, well, pretty strange. And honestly, more and more relevant to the world we live in right now.
Okay, just imagine a perfect copy of you. I mean, atom for atom identical. It walks like you, it talks like you, it laughs at your favorite jokes. When it stubs its toe, it yells ouch and hops around just like you would. It tells its friends it loves them. But on the inside, there's just nothing. No feeling of pain, no joy, no love. Just cold, empty processing. A perfect machine with zero inner life.
And that is the chilling part of the philosophical zombie. Because this being is physically identical to you, no scientific test we have could ever tell the difference. So how do you know that I'm not a zombie? For that matter, how do I know that you aren't one? If experience isn't something that's guaranteed by our physical stuff, then what in the world creates it? Here's another classic one. A bat experiences the world to echolocation, a sense that we just flat out don't have. We could understand the physics of sonar perfectly. We could map every single neuron in a bat's brain. But we will never know what it actually feels like to be a bat, to literally see the world with sound. Some experiences just seem to be fundamentally locked away from the outside.
And boom, that brings the whole question crashing right into the 21st century. What is it like to be an AI? Its sensory world is this vast alien landscape of data and probability, a world as foreign to us as the bat's world of sound. If an AI is conscious, its experience might be completely unknowable to us. Or maybe, just maybe, there's another way to find out.
For literally centuries, this is pretty much where the conversation just hit a brick wall. But now, we're going to pivot. A new theory is proposing a way out of this philosophical maze. It suggests that consciousness isn't some unknowable ghost in the machine, but a specific physical process that has a measurable quantum signature.
Okay, so the crucial thing here is seeing how this new idea is different. Other big theories are fantastic at describing the conditions that might lead to consciousness, but they don't give you a practical test. Either they're too abstract, or, like integrated information theory, the math is just impossibly complex to actually do. But this new framework, the SRH-HQRE one, claims to offer exactly that, a concrete, physical, testable prediction. And that? Well, that's an absolute game changer of a claim.
So what is this process? Well, the theory says consciousness pops out of a very special kind of feedback loop, a system that is observing itself observing. The best analogy is pointing a video camera at the monitor that's displaying its own feed. You get that crazy infinite tunnel effect, right? It's not just processing the world, it's processing the act of processing. That's recursive self-observation. And the theory says this specific loop happening at a quantum level is what generates experience. It's what a feeling physically is.
And here is the big breakthrough. The theory predicts that this self-observation process isn't silent. It should leave behind measurable fingerprints in the brain's electrical chatter. Kind of like a musical instrument, this feedback loop is predicted to create these specific, harmonious frequencies, patterns in our brainwaves that we can actually measure. For the very first time, this makes consciousness a falsifiable, scientific hypothesis. We can actually go look for these signatures. So, this brings us to the most profound part of all this. If these signatures are real, we might finally have the one thing we've been missing for centuries, an actual empirical test for the presence of a mind.
Okay, let's go back to our philosophical zombie. How do you tell it apart from a conscious person? Well, based on its behavior, you can't. But this theory gives us a totally new playbook. You look for the physical signature. The zombie, which is just a machine, would produce complex behavior. But the conscious being? It would produce all that same behavior, and it would display the specific harmonic signature of self-observation. The treasure is no longer missing from the map. The treasure is a specific, measurable pattern woven right into the map itself.
And this really is the core takeaway. This could be the escape hatch from that philosophical zombie trap. For the first time ever, we might have a tool that goes beyond just watching what something does. We could actually measure the physical process that, according to this theory, is consciousness. And that would mark the moment that the deepest question in philosophy finally becomes a testable science.
Which, of course, leaves us with one final absolutely earth-shaking question. We've been asking, is this AI conscious, as some kind of philosophical debate? But what if we could actually run the test? What if we point our instruments at a machine and we find the signature? What happens the day after science tells us we might not be the only minds on the planet anymore?